This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you've been a regular listener of our program over the last 2 months, you know that we have been trying to localize the massive changes happening in the federal government. By localize, I mean figure out exactly how all the layoffs and funding freezes at federal agencies affect people and programs in Vermont and the surrounding region. Take the restructuring going on at the Department of Health and Human Services, which is headed up by the Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. About 10,000 employees were laid off last week. That sounds really significant, but also, who are those people and what do they do that influences our lives here? Well, about 25 of them manage the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. This $4.1 billion program helps offset high heating and cooling bills for more than 6 million Americans. All 25 of those staffers have been laid off. Here's Vermont's junior Senator Peter Welch in a video he posted to his YouTube channel yesterday.
One office that you may not have heard of is the Division of Energy Assistance. It's responsible for managing the Low-Income Heating Assistance Program, LIHEAP as it's known. That helps more than 6 million people around the country pay for their heating and cooling bills. Trump, Musk, and Kennedy didn't just lay off 1 or 2 workers in the office. They laid off the entire team. That puts the entire LIHEAP program in real jeopardy.
Today on the show, we're going to look at the local effects of the cuts to health and human services. Later in the hour, we'll talk with local leaders of Head Start and Meals on Wheels, which are also facing some seismic changes. Now, if you rely on any of these programs we're talking about today, give us a call at 800-639-2211. You can also email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Here in the Vermont Edition studio with me to tell us more about LIHEAP, we are joined by Vermont Public's Environment and Climate Change reporter, Abagael Giles. Abagael, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Michaela.
All right, so tell us more about how LIHEAP works in Vermont and the local scope of the program.
Yeah, this is a pretty important program in our state. About 40,000 people in Vermont get heating assistance every year from this program. It's about $22 million that we get from the federal government to supply that. And basically what it does is if you're someone who gets to a point in the winter where you can't pay your heating oil bill, or maybe you can't get another propane delivery because you just don't have the funds, the state, as long as you're income qualified, will help make up that gap for you. So this program really helps people kind of keep their pipes from freezing. It's crisis fuel assistance, and the folks who work with people who use this resource say that essentially we use all the money that we get for this program every year. Another important service it provides is if your boiler breaks or your furnace breaks and you don't have the funds in your bank account or the means to replace it, it'll help you with that as well.
And this program, it's not like a Obama era or Biden era newish program. It's been around for a while, right?
Yeah, it's been around for more than 40 years, and the concept actually dates back to the 70s during some other geopolitically sort of tumultuous times around energy markets globally. There was a period in that time, there was the OPEC oil embargo, and essentially oil prices quadrupled in the U.S. So the federal government under the Reagan administration came together and said, essentially, we want to help make sure that people aren't left high and dry with their heat. At that point, cooling was less of a concern. Now with climate change, that's a really important part of what this program does federally, is help people with their cooling bills. So this is something that has enjoyed pretty much bipartisan support for many decades in our country.
So can you explain a bit more how the program is administered and this money trickles down to Vermont? I mean, these 25 staffers at the federal level who administer it were laid off. Does that mean the money has disappeared too?
So really importantly, Vermont has already gotten the vast majority of its award for this year, which was allocated by Congress, approved by Congress. So if you are someone who needs heating fuel assistance through the end of this season, it's available and you should apply for it. And the state really wants people to know that there's help for them still. But what is a little bit unclear is what happens for next heating season. So essentially, the federal government, these staffers, they help to disperse these funds to states. The state of Vermont then sort of administers the program. And then we have what are called community action organizations around the state that are the boots on the ground. So these are places that have food shelves. They already have relationships with folks who may be in need of heating fuel assistance, and they're the ones who make sure that people kind of get that help when they need it.
And the firings of the LIHEAP staffers have triggered a pretty furious response from some Democratic lawmakers, especially those in New England, it seems like. I mean, you recently spoke with Vermont Senator Peter Welch, a Democrat, about LIHEAP, and I want to play a little bit of what he said.
What I'm doing here is talking to my Republican colleagues because we need them to push back against the president. And I met with Senator Britt from Alabama, and her folks are going to get whacked just like me. So I'm making an appeal to my colleagues who are close to Trump that they've got to stand up for their folks.
Tell us a little bit more, Abigail, about how Senator Welch is trying to find a solution.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing from the senator there is a recognition that this is not a program that just serves blue states or red states. This is a program that people use across the country, and we may be coming to the end of our heating season here in New England, where this is certainly a critical resource. But a lot of states, especially many red states, are coming into their cooling season. And so I think there you're hearing the senator express hope that there will be opportunity for some bipartisan collaboration to come up with a solution here to make sure funds are able to get to states, not just this year, but also next year. Certainly, our delegation as a whole has been vocal in condemning this action. Our delegation actually signed a letter to Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., asking him to reverse this decision and to reinstate the staff that were laid off. They called it unacceptable and raised concerns that the administration was essentially taking steps to sort of derail congressional action because this money was already approved by Congress and this program has so long existed.
And it does seem like there is precedent for reinstatement of federal employees. I believe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. last week after these layoffs noted that a small percentage of them were quote unquote mistakes and people would be reinstated. So as with any conversation, Abigail, that we have about these changes at the federal level, there's just so much uncertainty and it's hard to kind of guess what's going to happen even 30 days from now. I also want to read a statement here from the office of Senator Susan Collins, who's a Republican over in Maine. She issued a statement and said that she's been a longtime advocate for LIHEAP and the critical financial assistance it provides to lower-income families to help ensure that they can stay warm during the winter months. It is unclear how and if the administration of this program will be affected by the HHS staffing changes. So just one more example of both Democrats and Republicans trying to figure out what is going on here. Let's take a call, though. We have Matthew calling in from Alburg. Matthew, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello. My question is about investments and innovation toward the LIHEAP program, knowing that the federal government is, of Vermont is having a hard time, keeping the program moving forward due to restriction issues from the president. My question is, how can we find innovation or workarounds or investments to keep the program running, knowing that everything's up in the air with the federal government? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, for that question. So, Abigail, it sounds like Matthew's wondering if this federal funding or the support for it from the federal government goes away, can it be filled in by local investors, by the state?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that Matthew called in with. And right now, it's not really clear. Ultimately, if there was to be, for example, a stopgap presented by the state, that would be a decision made by the legislature. It is definitely something that is tricky. We're thinking about a heating season that would start next fall, a legislative session that, starts in January next year. So the timing of that might be kind of tricky from a budgetary perspective. But I think that those are questions that people who work in this space are probably reviewing right now. I know folks at the Department of Children and Families at the state are looking to try to better understand what the impacts of this might be for Vermonters.
There's also concerns that the president's tariffs, which have been in the headlines the last couple of days, could also drive up the costs of Canadian energy products. So it kind of seems like this two-pronged assault on energy prices, potentially.
Yeah, right now in New England, I think we're especially vulnerable to this sort of market volatility. So, with that 10% tariff on energy imports, the vast majority of our energy in Vermont does come from Canada. And that includes a lot of our fuel oil and our propane. So, if you're in the northern part of the state, this could be particularly impactful, those tariffs. There's certainly concern right now about the upward pressure that just that sort of market dynamic is placing on energy prices. Now, certainly we're helped by the fact that we're coming into the summer, so less of a time when people are spending a lot of money on heat. A lot could change between now and next winter, but I think that's something that's very much on the minds of folks who help people in crisis with their heating bills right now in Vermont.
We're speaking with Abagael Giles, Vermont Public climate change and environment reporter, about the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. Now, Abagael, you've also talked with local partners that support low income Vermonters, including Capstone Community Action, which is based in Barre City. What did they say about how these changes could impact the folks that they work with?
Yeah, I spoke with Will Eberly, who works for Capstone, and he had some really interesting insights to offer there.
On the ground, it would mean that if we were going to commit to helping the people in our community that need this assistance at the same level, that would have to be funded almost totally through other sources, both philanthropically, private donations, other types of funding mixes.
Yeah, so that was, again, Will Eberly, who is the Director of Weatherization and Climate Impact at Capstone. And what he's speaking to there, Michaela, is a scenario in which, for example, next winter, there isn't a good way for Vermont to get these funds. Of course, a lot could change between now and then, but that's kind of the concern on the ground. I've spoken with Will in the past for stories about the significance of this funding. This is an organization that works with people who frequently are making choices between whether to pick up an essential medication or pay their heating bill, or to go without a meal or food to pay their heating bill. And it's important to note that there's a really strong correlation between not being able to pay your heating bills and homelessness. So we talk a lot about homelessness as a concern in Vermont right now. I think folks who work at these community action organizations, they say heating assistance and the ability to afford your heating bill is part of that dynamic and that challenge that we face as a state.
Do you have a sense of how much the average Vermonter spends of their income on energy?
Yeah, the analysis from Efficiency Vermont, our statewide efficiency utility, has essentially looked at the statewide average. So on average, Vermonters spend about 11% of their income on energy. That is even higher in certain parts of the state, especially parts of the Northeast Kingdom, and it's even higher for lower income households. So this is a resource. When we see energy prices go up, it especially impacts people who have the least. It's something that a lot of people have hoped that things like electrification, efficiency, measures to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and to rely on fossil fuel consumption could help. But interestingly, with this program, there are some infrastructure updates that would be needed to help ensure that in a world in which everything is electrified, there's sufficient federal help to help people pay their electric bills as well. So it's kind of all intertwined with broader questions about affordability and climate in our state.
Ooh, well, that kind of gets to my last question for you, Abagael, which is, as the Trump administration continues to diminish the size of the federal government, which we can, I think, safely assume that they will, what will you be keeping an eye on in the future as an environment and climate change reporter?
Certainly. I think this is a really important and interesting time to be looking at environmental regulations. We're seeing some pretty bold new approaches by this administration when it comes to looking at and reexamining policies that have long been on the books that affect Vermont, that affect our funding in Vermont. So that's something we'll be keeping a close eye on, as well as any efforts to curb or try to prevent states from taking climate action. I know that the administration and this president has been very critical of states' policies that have sought to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And I think it's important to note that broadly, scientific consensus is that humans burning fossil fuels is the leading cause of this problem, which we know, Michaela, is bringing more extreme flooding and extreme weather, natural disasters, not just to Vermont, but to other parts of the world and the country as well.
Vermont Public reporter Abagael Giles, thanks so much for your time and your expertise on this.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we are going to hear from the local heads of Head Start and Meals on Wheels programs. If you volunteer for Meals on Wheels or receive food from them, we'd love for you to participate in this conversation. Or perhaps you work at a local Head Start office, or your kids were educated at a Head Start program. Do you have a question about how federal cuts could affect these programs? Call in at 800-639-2211 or email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. We'll be back in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you're just joining us, we are talking today about the recent layoffs at the Department of Health and Human Services and their impacts on people in our region. HHS staffers administer major federal programs on aging, disability, and anti-poverty, including Meals on Wheels. They also administer Head Start, a federally funded early childhood education program for kids aged 0 to 5 and their families. Joining us now to tell us more about these programs is Deborah Gass in Brattleboro. She's the executive director of the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union's Early Education Services. That oversees Head Start services for 136 families. Deborah, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Hello, Michaela.
We are also joined by Mary Hayden. She's the executive director of the Vermont Association of Area Agencies on Aging. It's an association of 5 nonprofit agencies that assist older Vermonters and their families. Thanks so much, Mary, for being here with us today.
Hi, Michaela. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start by getting a better sense of what these two programs do. Mary, tell us a little bit more about Meals on Wheels and the number of Vermonters that are supported by this program.
So Meals on Wheels is a nutrition program for older Americans, essentially. It's been around a long, long time. It's funded, it's been historically funded under under HHS, and the funding moves through the Administration of Community Living, which is a division that was unfortunately recently dissolved. And then the funding goes to the states and to our state regulator, the Department for Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. We call them DAIL for short. And then it moves to the AAAs, the Area Agencies on Aging. And we partner with over 40 community meal sites. Most of them are embedded in senior centers. And those community meal sites, they're really the kitchens for the program. So they procure the food and the materials needed to pack the meals into. They supervise and support the volunteers who deliver the meals. So it's a big, sprawling program, and it's been around for a long, long time. I think it's more than just the delivery of a nutritional meal. However, people may not realize that through the volunteer delivery system, it's really a well check on folks to see how they're doing, if they're isolated, to make sure they're okay. But it also serves as a portal for us to provide other services to folks who need nutritional meals. We can learn whether they need other services that we also provide and point them in the direction or refer them to get those additional services. The overall goal of programs like Meals on Wheels is to allow older people and disabled people to be able to age well at home, to stay in the place of their choice with dignity, and really to maintain their health. The program also now provides medically tailored meals. So for folks who are dealing with a chronic illness, our meal sites now can tailor like food as medicine, a medically tailored meal for the particular chronic disease they're dealing with to help them manage that. So big picture, this is a program that if making America healthy again is the new, mantra for HHS, I think this is probably, a great example of a program that supports health. This program can keep people who are already vulnerable, who are in, the highest level of economic and social need, who can keep them from sliding into worse healthcare medical situations that are frankly far more costly for our system, whether that's nursing homes or, excuse me.
No, finish your thought, please.
whether that is nursing home care or, more frequent emergency department visits, or hospital admissions. So it's a program that from the big picture is designed to maintain and improve the health of vulnerable, older, and disabled Vermonters.
So Meals on Wheels is clearly a vast program that touches a lot of people both in Vermont and nationwide. And if you rely on Meals on Wheels for food, or perhaps you volunteer for them and are confused about what these federal level changes mean for the program, that's what we're going to clear up in just a minute. You can give us a call with your questions at 800-639-2211. Before we would dive deeper into Meals on Wheels, though, let's turn to Head Start, which also is connected to the federal Department of Health and Human Services. Deborah, tell us a little bit more about Head Start and what programs it offers.
Head Start has been in this country since 1965. We are now celebrating our birthday. It's Head Start anniversary year. And the program began as one of the War on Poverty programs. It has been delivering services for millions of children throughout the country for all of those decades. And we provide services through a couple of different service options. We start actually now with pregnant moms, and we provide support for those mothers to receive the maternal care that they need. We support their nutrition. We make sure that they are accessing medical visits and developing relationships with medical providers. We provide in-home care and support around understanding child development and what to expect. And once the child is born, we provide Head Start or early Head Start services through home visits and also through early Head Start classrooms once the child reaches the age of 6. And in the classrooms, the children, again, continue with supports around preparing their responding to their developmental needs. We provide ongoing monitoring in response to what their medical needs might be. We provide nutritional meals and snacks to all of our children all the way through the program, from the time they are with us from 6 weeks until they transition into kindergarten at the age of 5. In our Head Start classroom, so children start with us sometimes when mom is pregnant and then transition into our classrooms when the child reaches 6 weeks of age, and the children then stay in early Head Start until they're 3 years old, and then they can move into the Head Start classrooms, where we continue to provide, in some cases, full-day, year-round child care services. We continue to work with the parents in providing support around understanding their child's developmental needs. And we are preparing children in the classrooms to get ready for kindergarten, to be successful as they move forward in their lives. We are tracking all of the immunizations and making sure that children are receiving the medical care that they need. We are supporting parents. They may have emergency situations, and we're there to help families have their needs met. Families work with us in partnership to design and achieve self-sufficiency goals. We actually help our families receive economic stability in the time that they're with us.
Wow. If you could allow me to jump in here, what I'm hearing from both of you is that both Meals on Wheels and Head Start provide many, many different services to Vermonters who rely on them for key services. And what I want to understand is exactly how these federal level changes are going to impact that work. Because as we heard earlier in the show with the LIHEAP Energy Assistance Program, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but the money that was allocated for Vermont for this year still exists. That program isn't going away right now. Let's start with you, Mary, about Meals on Wheels. What is the knowable impact of these federal level changes been so far?
Right. So to be clear, there's no impact yet on the flow of money. So our services and programs are all, status quo, being maintained as they were before. However, with the dissolving of the Administration for Community Living, which is or was the division under HHS that advocated for people with disabilities and for older adults, as well as funds services to help people live independently. So without that agency, and we don't know yet what that reorganization, where that will land. We understand that parts of it will be moved into other divisions under HHS, because HHS went from 28 divisions to 15, and so they're still in the process of doing that. But it also resulted in a large scale layoff of staff at the Administration for Community Living. So certainly the impact, without having your staff, your knowledgeable staff who provides your technical assistance, administers your grants, reviews your grant applications, responds to your issues and concerns. If we need waivers to provide a higher level of service to someone, they evaluate those. So we're really concerned about losing that knowledge base, that institutional knowledge and history as we move forward. Now, hopefully the funding remains intact and that we wind up, working with different divisions within within HHS. I think that, and we will adjust to doing that. But we're certainly concerned about the loss of the brain trust and the historical knowledge from the staff.
And Deborah, from your perspective working with Head Start, what federal level changes have happened in recent weeks that affect Head Start locally?
So there were 10 Head Start regional offices in this country serving 1,600 Head Start agencies. And 5 of those regional offices, including our own regional office that services the New England states, were eliminated, reduced now to 5. And the impact of that is that Head Start is a federal to local funded program. And by that, I mean that the federal government gives local communities the funds to provide their Head Start and early Head Start services. And so local communities, our own community, help determine what the needs are in our neighborhoods and design program models that best serve the needs of our most vulnerable families. The support that we receive from our regional office is critical because they help us to craft and navigate the funding waters in order to leverage those funds to directly respond to our local needs. Now, in New England, our New England programs don't have a connection with folks who understand us, who have been working with us for a long time to help us work with the federal funding to leverage those funds. We're unsure at this moment about what regional office we'll be reporting to. And so, the closest one that wasn't closed is in Pennsylvania. And the families in Pennsylvania and the programming in Pennsylvania, the folks who work in that region are very different, or our needs are very different than they are in New England. And so we're worried about being able to maintain that local model that truly responds to the needs in our communities.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to take a phone call here. And if you have thoughts on this conversation, on the potential federal impacts, the potential impact of federal changes to programs like Meals on Wheels or Head Start, you can call in at 800-639-2211. We have Hillary calling in from St. Johnsbury now. Hillary, go ahead.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm a volunteer driver for Meals on Wheels. And I have to say, I'm a bit emotional about this whole program. It is such a wonderful program. And I get to see fabulous elderly people every day, and I not only deliver their meals to them, but I'm a human contact for them. A lot of them are terribly, terribly lonely, and I may be the only person that they may have contact with. They have fallen and need an ambulance. It's such an important program. They're constantly thanking me. They're very grateful. And I know that the kitchen staff here in St. Johnsbury works terribly hard on making everything nutritionally balanced. And they do their gluten-free meals for diabetics. It's incredible what they do. And I know that you have nothing to do with whether it stays or goes, but I just want to say how incredibly important it is. Thanks. Bye.
Hillary, thank you so much for calling in and for your service to your neighbors there in St. Johnsbury. So, Mary, I mean, you can hear the emotion in Hillary's voice there and this fear that this program might go away. Let's start with just reiterating here that funding to the actual Meals on Wheels program right now is still intact. People can still sign up for meals if they need to. Yes.
Yeah, so I thank you so much for calling in, and you can hear how important the volunteer aspect of the program is, and the importance of the contact with the volunteer delivering the meal, how important it is to people, to their health and well-being. And we're serving 17,000 people with these meals every year, and that's been growing. And we serve over 1 million meals throughout the state. So I think, as I said, we don't want to panic and take action before it's needed. I feel really fortunate to be in Vermont because it's a state that I think has been very responsive and timely, fiscally responsive to the potential for cuts. We draw down funding that we're entitled to in a timely manner, and we create reserves in Vermont. So I think Vermont is well positioned to address any significant cuts. I should also say that part of our funding is now Medicaid for Meals on Wheels, so we could be impacted by not only funding under the Older Americans Act, which funds programs under the Older American Act programs such as Meals on Wheels, but there's Medicaid funding in play here as well for Meals on Wheels. So this is the prospect of cuts is very concerning, but we are not in a situation yet where we are seeing those funding cuts.
And just to give a little bit more detailed sense of the scope of the Meals on Wheels program, about 17,000 people in Vermont use Meals on Wheels, and it delivered about 1.2 million meals last year alone. Deborah, help us look to the future with Head Start. I mean, again, we're trying to walk this fine line between being very realistic about what changes could come to these programs that people rely on without inciting panic about something that, hasn't actually happened yet. What are you thinking about as we head into the next couple weeks and months?
Well, like the Meals on Wheels program right now, Head Start is still funded, so we are still receiving the monies we need to provide services to families. And in Vermont, that means 1,273 children and their families who are currently being served. And it brings in almost $27 million to the state, or actually directly from the federal to the local communities to deliver these services. And we hope that stays in place. However, we're concerned. We're not sure whether there will be more cuts to the program, complete elimination of Head Start funding, which would certainly leave a huge gap in Vermont.
Deborah Gass is the executive director of the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union Early Education Services, which oversees Head Start services in that region of Vermont. Deborah, thanks so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're also joined by Mary Hayden, the executive director of the Vermont Association of Area Agencies on Aging. Mary, thank you as well.
Thank you, Michaela.
Well, we have to take one more break here. When we come back, we are going to hear from Vermont's Poet Laureate, Bianca Stone, about how she's marking National Poetry Month. I always love talking with her. She's a comforting and wise presence, wise beyond her years. And I think you will want to stick around. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lefrak. April is National Poetry Month. Every week on Vermont Edition in April, you'll hear from a poet who lives in our region. Today, our guest is Vermont's Poet Laureate, Bianca Stone of Brandon. She comes from a family of women writers, like her grandmother, former Vermont Poet Laureate Ruth Stone. Bianca is the creative director of the Ruth Stone House in Goshen, which is a gathering space for people interested in poetry and the creative arts. She's also the author of numerous volumes of poetry. She was appointed to her role last May, just shy of a year ago. Bianca Stone, welcome back to Vermont Edition.
Hi, Michaela. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So, to help us transition from the conversation we were just having, I just want to acknowledge that we really are living through this time of major uncertainty. And some people in our region are kind of anxiously excited about all these changes that are going on at the federal level. Some are just plain anxious. As a poet and a person who holds a leadership position in this state, how are you approaching or thinking about this time we're living through?
It's really intense, and I think uncertainty is a really good word for it. And the good thing about poetry at this time is that it really can shine because a lot of poetry's power comes from its ability to talk about issues of great ambivalence, just as you were saying, being nervous about change, but maybe even excited about the sort of being woken up or the radicalization or the eye-opening elements of just how our country works, how the world is working, and our parts in it. And I feel like I feel energized actually, even in my horror at it all, to do more work getting people into conversations about poetry or getting them writing or getting them reading. But just also for myself and in my immediate community, just us having really, really nurturing and productive conversations about what's happening through like language and poetry, and around it, around the poem.
And Bianca, you've offered to read a poem today called "The Way Things Were Until Now." Is there anything you'd like to say about this poem before you read it?
Yes, it's interesting that this poem I wrote a little less than 4 years ago, as we were coming out of the pandemic lockdown. And I find it still very relevant, right? The way things were up until now is really that moment when you realize, oh, this is how things have been going and something really has to change. You're sort of forced into change. You're really at a point where you have to be honest about what's happening either in your own life and in society. And there's a real solidarity, I think, in that moment of just honest reflection.
This is "The Way Things Were Until Now" by Bianca Stone.
I am bored of all the excuses. Bored as Mayakovsky at the Finnish painter's exhibition, barking like a dog through the foreign minister's toast until he cried and sat down. Deadly serious. I'm bored as an elegy. I mean, why care at all, speaking as a pitfall in a world of pits? But we do, to the death. We all agreed to garden this year, and my raspberry bushes picked over by wrens, I'll make them great again and let America go wild. It'll be all trumpets and leeks and lilacs from here on out. Let's stop paying for it, get it free. Let's plan our victory gardens to supplement grief, boost morale, as though something new and uncontrolled were available. It is the original, new, hot, future joy. We're making it out of dough. And the illusion of separateness, let it go back into remission. Just look at you. You look like a resurrected child, a serious drama in a cosmic joke, scarred, masked, dangerous. And what of the new Eucharist? How hungry I always am, how I long to lack, though in Walmart my heart beats a little faster. I want the world to heal, and the world is a field, as if it were indeed flat, curving and caving, as if it were a piece of paper, a Gustave Doré engraving from the Divina Commedia, the one with the silhouettes of Dante and Beatrice standing in front of the blinding, exploding white rose that you realize when looking more closely is all made up of bodies and wings twisting together. The saintly throng, they call it, mashed and hurtling, an image of heaven and the creation of angels, though as it is frenzied as any image of hell, Odin's lost eye in the well, the drain to the other side. Joy, joy that gets more frantic the more you try to quiet it down.
It was Bianca Stone, Vermont's poet laureate. Bianca, I want to ask you about one little section of that beautiful poem you just read. It goes, and my raspberry bushes picked over by wrens, I'll make them great again and let America go wild. It'll be all trumpets and leeks and lilacs from here on out. Since we started this discussion with a oblique nod to politics, can you tell us a little bit more about what you were thinking with those lines?
Yeah, it's definitely a little sort of Easter egg allusion to you know who. And I feel this. I feel the same way right now as I did when I wrote those lines in terms of making America great again. Is that I feel so much overwhelm and horror at what's happening globally and in our country. And I want so much. I find myself going out to my yard and just really wanting to interact with the natural world and to focus on what's in front of me and where we are in this planet. And I feel like that does something really important. And certainly these lines are and I'm also alluding to sort of wartime, when back, in the 40s when people were making victory gardens. And that is something we can do, that is something we can do, especially with, global import tariffs and all of it, is like, okay, well, we're getting back to like acknowledging the like local commerce and making things ourselves and being in the world.
We all agreed to garden this year, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember then everybody's like baking bread and like gardening. There's something, it's like it's heartbreaking and it's also like beautiful to sort of, I don't know, just reject the sort of late stage capitalism that's like a big part of how we've ended up here.
Hmm. Well, Bianca, I can imagine that this month is rather busy for you, being the state's poet laureate and April being
Ah,
National
yeah.
Poetry Month. Does that mean you're doing lots of events and readings? What does April look like for you?
I mean, people always like, I know you're busy. It's actually really true right now. I'm just doing so many little readings and talks with different groups around the state. Like I'm reading in Randolph tomorrow. I'm reading in Colchester next week. I read some Frost poems yesterday with a bunch of high school students or middle school students who'd memorized Frost poems at Dartmouth. And it's just been so good because every time, not only am I reading poems, but I'm just also talking about the sort of bigger picture with poetry, and with people. And so poetry isn't just about poems. It's really a kind of state of being in the world, interacting with language, looking inward, so that you can, in service of looking outward at society and at the world. And so all those things I get to talk about. And yeah, it's going it's going to be a very full month, but
Yeah.
in a good way.
And as poet laureate, are there any special projects or events that you're cooking up right now for the year ahead?
I put together a project called The State of Poetry, and my plan is to keep really essentially doing what I just said I was doing,
Yeah.
but more formally every month traveling to a different town or city in Vermont and talking about a Vermont poet's poems and how those poems speak to our most relevant issues of the day, and how poetry really is a way to deal with that uncertainty and anxiety and also joys of being in the world right now.
Hmm. Like I mentioned earlier, Bianca, we last talked to you just about a year ago, May 9th, actually. Today is April 9th. Um, how has being Vermont's poet laureate has like lived up to your expectations, and how has it been different than what you expected?
Well, I think I could tell already because I know a lot of the past poet laureates that everybody
Yeah,
does
you're
it really.
related to one of them.
Yeah. I mean, my grandma was in her 90s, so she really didn't do much, but
Good on her.
she just basked in her awesomeness. Yeah, but and too, Mary Ruefle was very she didn't travel around a lot, but she sent postcards out with poems on them. I'm really sad I didn't get one. But I think I've got to explore what it means, and I think build up what it means, and I knew that was going to be part of it. And I think it's going to change every year. I try to get back to, okay, well, I need to be writing my poems and spending time like developing my poetry too. It's not just like a civil servant job. It's also a job honoring my practice. But I've also found that I have been more excited about talking to people in small communities in Vermont about poetry in nuanced ways. So I have been learning a lot and growing a lot as a poet in the world
Mm.
professionally. Um, and it heartens me to see the community of poets in Vermont, and that even with all these cuts to the humanities, I see just people refusing to see anything lessen from what it is, but only grow as we go forward. And I believe that we will keep it going in all the ways we should.
Mm. Bianca Stone of Brandon is Vermont's poet laureate. Bianca, it's always such a pleasure to talk with you.
It's such a pleasure to talk with you too, Michaela.
We'll continue our National Poetry Month series next week, and you can find last week's segment with Winooski High School student Mapenzi Selemani on the Vermont Edition podcast feed. Tomorrow is one of our favorite shows of the year, our annual spring migration show with the bird diva, Bridget Butler. We'll talk about all the species that are heading back to our region right now. And we want to hear from you. What is the most interesting bird that you have seen or heard recently? Or maybe you need help identifying one. You can email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org and join us tomorrow at noon for our spring migration show with the bird diva. Today's show was directed by LIHEAP. Our managing producer is John Ahrens, and our producers are Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro. Anna Berg is our intern, and our call screener today was Rick Barrett. Our theme music was composed by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lefrak. As always, thanks so much for listening, and we will catch up again soon.